Welcome, my friends, to the Beggars and Brawlers podcast. This is episode 66, recorded January the 31st of 2023, as I sit in the cab of my pickup. And it's been a full month since our last episode, which may have been your first clue that things are changing around the Beggars and Brawlers podcast to something, I hope, much bigger and better. But I can at least guarantee that it won't suck. How, you ask? Listen on. So, if you're one of my 10 listeners, thank you. I have always had a love for audio, and I've usually had a lot of fun recording these episodes for you. In the beginning, I thought that this podcast would be like an audio version of my newsletter for all the people who would rather listen to me than read the newsletter, and it turns out that's not so many people. That, or, and this is very believable given my track record, I've just done a bad job of spreading the news about it. But either way, at some point, the effort of making this podcast hasn't felt like it's worth the reward, which is a shame because I really do like doing these episodes. And I love having a place to release previews of the audio before a new audiobook comes out. And though I haven't done it that often, I also love having other authors on to talk about books. So the solution to all this is, of course, do the things you love, quit the things you don't, which I think is probably good advice for life, with the caveat that sometimes we have to do things that suck or that we don't love for the sake of things or people that we do. For me, that means changing the format of this podcast a solid 2.5 years after I started it, and after I've put out an episode faithfully every 2 weeks. So the first thing to go is regularity. I really like having every 2 weeks as a goal to keep me from releasing a podcast once a year, but I would rather put out quality content than put out frequent content. So look for me a little less often, but with better episodes, which is related to the next point. The next change is the format of the non-preview episodes. Those I have a lot of fun with, and I'm going to keep putting out whenever I have a new book, if nothing else, so that I have a place to ramble at length about the background of my books. But the non-preview episodes, where I tend to ramble at length about my works in progress or those kinds of things, those are the places that I've been feeling like something is missing. And when I think about the podcasts that I love listening to, like Lords of Limited, A More Civilized Age, Intentionally Blank, the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia podcast, I've realized that the common thread between them is the dynamic between the hosts. That they're not just sharing an interest in a thing that I also share an interest, but the people talking to each other are genuinely friends who have fun and they're just hanging out talking about the thing that they like, which I happen to like too. And when I listen to those shows, I get this feeling like I'm hanging out with them too, talking about the things that I'm interested in, which is something that I'm always going to want to do. So my problem on this podcast has been it's really hard to hang out with yourself, even for introverts like me. So the other big change to the podcast going forward is that I'm not going to do it alone. Don't worry, I'm not going to do an interviews only podcast because those have been the death knell of some podcasts that I really love. We Can Do Hard Things. I'm looking at you. But I want other authors and fantasy readers to hang out with me in this space, to talk maybe about the same things that I normally talk about, the random topics that come up when you're writing and reading fantasy every day. But I want other opinions and experiences and points of view to bounce off of, to keep me from just sounding like I'm talking to myself, to hopefully find that dynamic that I love so much in my favorite podcasts and bring it to this one. Because when I listen to this one, to what I've done so far, it would not be one of my favorite podcasts. And you, the person who is listening, even though it's not that good, you're awesome. So thank you. Um, am I going to find that dynamic? I don't know. The people that I vibe with right now, none of them are quite right as a co-host for the show. But one of my favorite podcasts, Lords of Limited, are two people who just loved Magic the Gathering and were complete strangers when they started recording the podcast, and now they're like best friends, and their dynamic is so good on the show. So I believe that I can find someone, and if not, I've had a great connection with lots of the people that I've interviewed. And so the idea is that I'm going to have them on and yes, talk about their books and about their journey as an author for the first episode, but then also to record a couple of episodes where it's more like just us hanging out and talking about all the things I normally talk about, just with someone else to talk about them. And those are the episodes that I'm really looking forward to. Although I'm always interested to hear people's journeys and what it's like for them as an author and to read their books because I'm going to kind of have to read the books to be able to talk about them. So the main thing is I just don't want to keep doing this alone. I want it to have a better dynamic. So to you who have listened to me through so much thick and, well, a lot of thin too, I hope you'll keep listening. And to you, theoretical listener who came to this podcast years later because you loved the vibe that we created in the later episodes, thanks for listening this far back. The rest will be different, but I've always tried my best to make those early episodes worthwhile. In the end, it's up to you whether you think they are or not, or the ones going forward or not. I'm going to make sure that they're worthwhile to me and that it's a podcast that I would want to listen to. That's my baseline. And something needs to change because right now I don't want to listen to them. Crazy to say, but that's where I'm at. So, I'm not going to do my usual thing today where I pick a topic and soliloquize about it. The soliloquies are done, except maybe for those preview episodes. So, coming next month is an indie fantasy author I met as a sort of nemesis in the Amazon charts during my recent launch sale, then discovered was writing a very kindred series to the Tidecaller Chronicles, and decided would be, after I read the book, decided would be a lot of fun to chat with. Their name is Morgan Cole, author of Marilia the Warlord, which is the book that we'll be talking about in the first episode, so consider that your homework. Then hopefully we'll have a few episodes to just hang out and talk about our books in progress and how it feels to be authors and fantasy readers and human beings on planet Earth right now. So I hope you'll listen in. Thank you for listening whenever you do. One thing I can promise, as I mentioned in the beginning, is I'm going to read the books of the people that I invite on, all of them, before I invite them on. So you're getting a no-suck guarantee from me, at least in terms of the books. There's no promises on the podcast, as usual. So till next time, read on. In particular, read Marilia if you get a chance. I promise this one is worth it.
For more information on Levi Jacobs and his books, including the award-winning Tidecaller Chronicles, visit www.levijacobs.com. Or for a free audiobook, only available to podcast listeners, go to www.levijacobs.com/free. Thanks for listening, and read on.